Now, I could probably spend the next 30 minutes just talking to you all about why I think custom apps are so great. But instead, what I'm going to do is invite Chris Creel, our VP of Labs at Cotiviti, on stage. Now, Cotiviti is a leading healthcare information company. They've got about 5,000 employees today, and at the request of his executives, Chris has been leading initiatives across the company to help the company 10x their productivity and efficiency as they continue to grow. With that, please welcome Chris.
Hey, Karishma.
Thank you so much for joining us on stage today, Chris. Now, I know you've been at Cotiviti for quite some time. You've surely seen a lot of change over the years. And it was about 3 years ago that you actually adopted Slack internally. Talk to us a little bit about why you decided to build CoachBot.
Well, so it came from this 10x challenge from our executives. Now, a 10x productivity and challenge for any company is crazy. It's a moonshot. But my partner on the executive team, he really just wanted to force our thinking. And so we knew it wasn't going to be a new technology or a new technology stack or new people. We knew that we really had to think about this holistically. And so we thought, well, what if we could run a large organization as though it were a startup? Get rid of all the management hierarchy and the org charts, and see if we could get that kind of agility at scale. And when we began doing research in that, we found one of the critical ways of doing it is constant 360-degree feedback. With that feedback, we found that individuals could modulate each other's behavior a lot more effectively and really achieve that kind of agility and stay adaptive, for those of you who saw the great Tomo discussion the other day. We were using surveys in the beginning to collect this feedback, and it was rough. They're heavyweight, they're outside of your normal working environment, and what we found was that people began dreading it, the engagement in the process went down, and the quality of the feedback was pretty terrible.
And when you're trying to maintain an agile organization, I'm sure getting that constant feedback is critical to the success of maintaining a flat organization.
That's
so
right.
Talk to us a little bit about, when you decided to move off of this other survey tool that you were using and build something custom. Why did you decide to build on Slack?
So a developer recommended it. They were frustrated with the survey, and he came to me and said, you should just try and build a Slack bot for this thing. And at first I thought, well, how would I even go about doing that? But then I began researching it. And the more I researched it and the more I played around with the idea, the more I realized that I could actually make this a really efficient process. And I discovered that because of the Slack integration and the API, I could probably collect more information, and it would enable me to visualize the health of the entire organization.
That's a really interesting point. I'd love to get back to the concept of visualizing that. But do you actually mind sort of walking us through a little bit of what this app would look like in action?
Yeah, I'd love to. So let's say I have a colleague. We'll call him Michael. And let's say Michael, he has been late on some of his tasks. He gets easily distracted. And I need to provide him some feedback in order to help him up his game. And so you can see here, if you go to the next slide, I'm gonna just use Slack to provide him with this feedback directly. And I'm gonna tell him here, focus on completing a task before taking up another. Now, this feedback's a little poor. I'm not sure how effective it's gonna be. But the thing that you should take away from this particular picture is how easy this is. Honestly, it's just a few more characters than if I were to Slack Michael directly. We're only talking about this /coach@Michael, and then the feedback I would provide him anyway.
OK, so I completely agree. You just type one sentence into Slack where you're already working. What happens when you press enter?
So honestly, this is like the coolest thing, because this is where a custom application beats a survey hands down. It's interactive. Sure. You can have a conversation with a Slack chat bot. And so you'll notice here that that bot is providing me with counsel on how to provide better feedback to my colleague, asking me to make it more personal, make it subjective, make it actionable, make it positive. And the reason I came to these suggestions is because we've been collecting feedback for 5 years now, the years that we were using the survey, and then, of course, the years now that we were using the Slack chatbot. And so we were able to look at what features in that feedback drove the best performance. And so it's not just a guess. We were able to use that feedback and really do some analysis to get us to where we needed to be.
So just to clarify there, I think that's called feedback inception, where you're giving feedback on the feedback someone's
inception.
submitting.
Yeah, I like that.
So I think we can all agree this feedback looks a little bit more better. We've incorporated some of the suggestions per sort of the natural language tooling. Now what happens when you hit submit?
Well, something to take away here is that with a survey, it's a once and done. It's a fire and forget, and you're over. It's over. But with the CoachBot, I'm able to go back and update my feedback based on the counsel that I got from the bot. That's a big deal. I was talking to one of my colleagues earlier today, and he said, it's actually kind of a process for me. I enter my feedback, and I'm mad. And then I think about it, and I'm like, maybe I should go back and fix that. And so it's actually a process that people go through in order to get really good quality feedback. So here you can see that the bot thinks this is pretty good. And at the end of the quarter, the bot can then take all that feedback, package it up, and create a report that we can distribute to all of our everybody who received feedback and give them counsel on how to improve. We've then created a coaching team that can take this feedback and uses that feedback to come up with very specific improvement targets for every single person in the organization to try and help them up their game.
Okay. And since, as you mentioned, there's sort of better engagement using Slack, people are getting both constant feedback and then able to review that on a quarterly basis.
Yeah, so what's kind of cool is with the bot can now interact with each individual throughout the quarter because the bot has the feedback, and so it can kind of dole it out through the quarter, remind each individual of the things that their colleagues had told them to improve. And so it's actually an engagement process throughout the entire quarter.
I think that's a telltale sign that one day we'll all be working for robots and they'll control our lives.
We already are. It's already happening.
So one thing you mentioned a little bit earlier that I wanted to get back to is building this process into Slack, building custom, allowed you to do something interesting, and that was to visualize the data. So can you talk to us a little bit more about how you were able to do that?
Yeah, so this is like the coolest thing ever. What you're seeing here is a visualization of all that feedback that I was able to collect through the bot. And so just to give you a quick legend on what you're looking at, the black circles are the strongest performers. They got really good, strong, positive feedback from their colleagues. These would be people that we would be thinking about, okay, what can we do to help them expand their influence in the organization, help them really take all the goodness that their colleagues are talking about and figure out a way to spread that further. The circles that are white, those are the folks with the greatest amount of improvement. That areas of improvement. Maybe they're just in the wrong part of the network. Maybe we can think about repositioning them in the network so that they can perform in a different place, really taking advantage of their skills. And the red circles are just folks that provided feedback but didn't get it back in return.
Okay. And then how about the lines? What do they tell you?
Well, so the lines actually represent the health of the relationship. So we collect EQ, emotional quotient, for those of you who are familiar with this concept. We collect this data the CoachBot collects this data through that feedback process. And so I'm able to visualize the relationships. The cool thing about this is that now we're not just focused on the individuals, we're focused on the group as a whole. We can think holistically about the team. So this might be one of the very first times that our executives have seen what the team actually looks like, how work gets done, and it's completely independent of the org chart.
Okay, and so I mean, it kind of looks like a lot of blobs, but I'm noticing some patterns here. So over on the right, it seems like there's not a lot of interaction going on. What does that tell you?
So this is really curious because you're right, this group is new to the model. They're new to this hierarchy-free model. They're also new to Slack. They haven't been using Slack for very long. What I find particularly interesting about this is that all of these people work out of the same geographic location.
Wow. So they're in the same office, but they're using Slack and they're just starting to use Slack today. Now, how about this group over on the right?
Yeah.
Over on the right, that's everybody seems pretty close and well connected. What does that tell you?
Yeah, so that particular group is, they started using Slack in January of 2015, which is when we switched over to it. So they've been using Slack the longest. They've also been in this model the longest. So these folks have been working without management oversight, without an org chart, without hierarchy, since January of 2015. And the other thing to note here is that they're scattered across the globe. These folks are scattered across India, they're scattered across Russia, and they're scattered across the United States. And yet, you can see here, very tight-knit group, great relationships, strong scores, and they move as though like they're a small adaptive startup.
Wow, that's really interesting. So it seems like Slack is what's helping bring together even a globally dispersed team in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Chris, if you could just sort of summarize for us, what has the overall impact been with using CoachBot and Slack at Cotiviti?
Well, so our company has done 3 independent studies of this work indirectly. So we've done engagement surveys. Most companies do these to try and figure out what engagement scores are looking like. And for groups that are using this model, that are using Slack, we see engagement scores that are 20 to 50 points higher than places that aren't using it. That is a huge deal. The other thing that we've noticed is that employees are now hyper engaged in this. I wish I could show you my feedback that I get from my colleagues. It's pages of the best feedback you can imagine. I was just showing somebody this the other day, and their comment to me was, that's amazing that people put this kind of energy. And my point to them was, this is the kind of stuff that they want to say to me anyway. This just gives them a very light way of getting that information to me. And the last thing is, the impact overall for the organization is it's a magnet. People are really excited now about rolling this out in a much bigger way.
It's impressive, 20 to 50 points. Now, for anyone in the audience here that might be thinking about building CoachBot or something custom on Slack, final parting words of advice that you might be able to share?
Yes. So when my colleague, the developer I mentioned earlier, came to me and suggested this, I had this initial tightness in my chest. Frankly, I'm not a hardcore developer like these guys are. But I noticed that they're all using Slack. They all love Slack. And so if I could give them a tool inside Slack, just by the nature of the fact that this is where they like to be, I could probably drive better engagement. And then it turned out that making that app, it wasn't all that hard.
Yeah.
The work that Slack has put into the API, into the libraries, it's really impressive. And it's actually quite straightforward to do this. And so I was able to pull this together in about 6 weeks. It was nights and weekends because I had a day job as well. But the return that I've gotten on that investment is immense.
Great. That's really great to hear. We're really committed on making it easier to develop on Slack. So I appreciate you sharing your story with us, Chris.
You bet. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Chris.
so much.